Breath of the Wild was the dawn of a new era for The Legend of Zelda, and Tears of the Kingdom has carried that torch high and proud. These new Zelda games have moved the franchise forward in many ways, away from the linear path defined by dungeons and key items, towards an open world where you can run, climb, and fly through the sky anywhere that you want to. Well, today I want to take a look at some of the Zelda traditions that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have forgotten, plus get your thoughts on what you'd like to see from the next Legend of Zelda adventure. Well, Tears of the Kingdom has been out for a few months now, and Nintendo managed to one-up their previous title, Breath of the Wild, seemingly doing the impossible by creating a better game in Tears of the Kingdom. And while I do think that Tears of the Kingdom is arguably the better of the two titles, you could say that Breath of the Wild is the more important of the two games, given it was Link and Zelda's first 3D open-world adventure. So while Nintendo is striding forward with their open-world design of The Legend of Zelda, they've also left behind a few traditions of the series. Before we get into that though, what do you think about the open-world Zelda formula, and how does it compare to previous Zelda titles? Do you prefer it? Would you like to see Nintendo go back, or can you not imagine playing a linear Zelda title again? Well, share your thoughts in the comments, but without further delay, let's get into the Zelda traditions Nintendo has left behind. Well, first up, we've got linear story progression, so in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you could go through the whole game without touching the main story beats. In Breath of the Wild, you found memories dotted around Hyrule, and in Tears of the Kingdom, they served up the story via the Dragon's Tears. Now, it felt like Nintendo made the story slightly easier to access in Tears of the Kingdom, perhaps responding to feedback from players. Well, as well as picking up the story in any order and piecing it back together, the story feels much richer and more alive with those fully voiced cutscenes. Well, next up, green Tunic Link is a thing of the past, so Link, well, he has had a change in fashion. Link's outfit used to be green throughout his adventure. Sometimes his clothes would change throughout the adventure, like in A Link to the Past, to denote Link getting more powerful. But now, Link has a vast choice of clothing. His new colour in Breath of the Wild was blue, as the colour of the champions. Nintendo have also introduced many armour sets and colour dyes, allowing the player to pick and choose their own style for Link. Tears of the Kingdom added many classic Zelda outfits from the history of the Zelda franchise, so if you want to don the green tunic, well, then you can. Personally, I quite like the blue champion's tunic, with the modern hood and also the Hylian trousers. That is definitely the look I like to wear in the most recent games. Well, next up we've got Traversal. So Breath of the Wild's focus was climbing, and you could literally climb any surface and jump off and use your paraglider to get safely back to the ground. This instantly made all other Zelda games and pretty much any other open world game second best to Breath of the Wild. After experiencing being able to climb any surface, I just wanted this for all games. Then Tears of the Kingdom upped the ante once again and allowed us to skydive off anything. This gave us a huge sense of freedom, travelling up into the Sky Islands, then diving off to the ground or down into the depths. And it's really going to be interesting to see when Nintendo takes these traversal mechanics next. Well, next up we've got traditional companions. So Link's journey in Breath of the Wild is pretty much solo, and in Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo did add companions for dungeons. However, compared to classic Zelda adventures like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker and Skyward Sword, Link is pretty much alone for his adventures. Fi was particularly chatty in Skyward Sword, but Navi lives long in the memory as a great travelling companion. Companions may have been left out of Breath of the Wild to further reinforce that feeling of a broken, desolate world corrupted by Calamity Ganon, but in this new era of Zelda adventures, Link certainly seems more alone than ever. Well, next up we've got linear progression. So back in the classic Zelda adventures like A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, Link sets off on an adventure, beating a series of dungeons, gathering various items to get stronger as the adventure progresses. In Breath of the Wild, it was entirely possible to leave the Great Plateau and then go straight for the final boss calamity Ganon and beat him. You definitely had to have your wits about you, but some players have run straight to the final boss after the tutorial and completed the game. Nintendo serves up quests and side adventures in both Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, but really it's up to the player to decide what to do and in what order. So will we ever go back to something linear like we had in classic Zelda titles? Personally, I don't think so, but I would love to hear what you think. Well, next up we've got musical instruments. So a big part of the Zelda franchise's past has been musical instruments, and they've even featured in some titles of the best in the series. The Ocarina of Time was featured in the game of the same name, plus also in Wind Waker Link uses a conductor's baton. Link is instrumentless in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, although Cass takes up the musical mantle in Breath of the Wild, that wandering Rito bard. Unfortunately, he's not found yet in the sequel. The stable trotters are found in Tears of the Kingdom, but it looks like magical musical instruments for Link have taken a back seat, alongside many other Zelda traditions. Well, next up we've got linear dungeons. So linear dungeons frankly are out, and while we have seen temples in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there's much more of an emphasis on shrines. And we got some classic dungeon design in the Zelda franchise from A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. You know, there were some absolutely incredible dungeons, which many Zelda fans miss. Breath of the Wild did have divine beasts, and Tears of the Kingdom has the wind, fire, water and lightning temples, plus also that secret one too. Shrines are dotted all over Hyrule in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and this is where the majority of the puzzling takes place. Well, next up we got weapon durability, so this one is going to be divisive, and that is weapon durability. Breath of the Wild introduced the weapon durability mechanic in an effort to promote open world exploration. For such a long time, Link only had been using one sword and a bow and arrow, plus also a magical item here and there. Well, now Link could use any weapon he found, even taking weapons off his enemies. Tears of the Kingdom carried on this tradition, introducing the fuse mechanic, which would alleviate the weapon durability somewhat. Even though weapons would still break, you'd at least get some more time out of them. And finally, we have a severe lack of the Triforce. So one of the biggest changes we've seen in the story is the lack of the Triforce. In early Zelda games, this was one of the most reoccurring story beats you could count on. You'd have Link, Zelda and Ganon, and somewhere you'd be gathering the three pieces of the Triforce. So Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have done away with the Triforce, hardly even mentioning it, and while you can see the Triforce in some design elements, it is not mentioned by name. And in Tears of the Kingdom, the powerful items to collect are the secret stones rather than the Triforce itself. Courage, wisdom and power are alluded to in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, with the Zonai worshipping animals that represent them, with dragons for courage, owls for wisdom, and boars for power. Well, Nintendo has definitely left many traditions behind in this evolution of the Legend of Zelda series. However, I am really curious to know what you think about it. Do you miss these traditions, and do you want to see them return in future Zelda adventures? Let us know in the comments below. Well, that is it today for this look at the forgotten traditions in the Legend of Zelda franchise, and as always, thank you so much for watching or listening. Well, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you real soon.